A man is lying on the ground in the open country with a rock under his head. No tent, no fire that we know of, no servant, no wife, no flock, nothing that marks a person as someone who belongs somewhere. Just a man, a stretch of hard dirt, and the kind of darkness that falls fast once the sun drops behind hills that have no name you would recognize. His name is Jacob. And 3 days ago he was still his father's son, sleeping under a roof, wrapped in the smell of his mother's cooking. Now he is running, not toward anything, away from something, from a brother who has sworn, in words their own father overheard, that the moment their old man dies, Jacob will die too. You know what that kind of fear feels like, even if you've never had a brother chasing you across a desert. The specific shape of it, lying still in the dark, straining to hear a sound that isn't there yet, wondering if the thing you're afraid of is already closer than you think. Maybe you've lain awake with a version of that same fear. Not a brother with a weapon, but a phone call you're dreading. A diagnosis you haven't opened yet. A mistake you know is about to catch up with you. You know the feeling of having absolutely nowhere left to hide. Jacob has that fear, and he has nothing else. No walls, no door to bolt, no altar his hands built, no temple raised by his own labor, nothing between him and the sky except the sky itself. And that, the nothing, is exactly the point you need to hold on to. Because somewhere in the middle of that emptiness, while Jacob sleeps with a stone for a pillow, something appears above him. Something that was not built by his hands or anyone's hands. A staircase, going somewhere no one has ever measured, made by no builder anyone can name. We are going to come back to what that staircase actually was, because almost everyone who has ever heard this story pictures it wrong. But not yet. This is not a story about a ladder. This is not a story about a strange dream a tired man had on a rock. This is not a story about luck or coincidence, or a lucky break for a man who badly needed one. This is a story about what happens the moment the ground itself opens, for a man who has just proven beyond any doubt that he does not deserve it. Because here's what you need to understand about the man lying on that ground. Jacob did not arrive at this moment as a hero fleeing injustice. He arrived as a thief, fleeing the scene of his own crime. And to understand what happens next, to understand why a staircase would appear over a fugitive with dirt under his fingernails and a stolen blessing in his mouth, you have to go back 3 days, into a tent, into a lie, into a family that was already broken long before Jacob ever left it. Stay with me. It gets worse before it gets holy. Go back 3 days, into the tent of an old man who can no longer see. Isaac is dying, or believes he is, which in that world amounts to the same thing. He calls for Esau, his firstborn, the son he loves for a very specific reason. The text doesn't hide from you, because Esau hunts, because Esau brings him the meat he craves, because Esau is the son who tastes like the outdoors and the life Isaac used to live before his eyes went dark. Isaac sends Esau out to hunt one final meal, so that afterward, with his belly full and his heart soft, he can give Esau the blessing that belongs to the firstborn. But someone else is listening at the tent flap. Rebekah, Isaac's wife, Jacob's mother, has heard every word. And she does something you need to sit with for a moment, because it is not a small thing. She dresses Jacob in his brother's clothes. She covers his smooth arms in goatskin so that when his blind father reaches out to touch him, he will feel the coarse hair of a hunter instead of the soft hands of the son who stayed home. And she sends Jacob in to lie to his father's face. Here's what most people skip past too quickly. Isaac is suspicious. He asks the question twice. Are you really my son Esau? And twice, Jacob lies. Not once, under pressure. In a moment of panic. Twice, deliberately, to a blind old man who trusted him enough to reach out and touch his arm. And the blessing is spoken. Once spoken in that world, it cannot be taken back. A blessing wasn't decoration. It was a legal transfer, binding, permanent, as real as a signed deed to a piece of land. And then Esau comes home, and you have never heard a sound like the one Genesis records coming out of that man's mouth when he realizes what has happened. He weeps. He begs his father for some blessing, any blessing, left over. And what's left is smaller, harder, a portion soaked in the anger of a man who has just watched his future, walked out the door in someone else's skin. Esau says one thing to himself after that, just one thing. But it's the thing that turns this whole story from a family squabble into a manhunt. The days of mourning for my father are approaching, and then I will kill my brother Jacob. Their father overhears it, and this is where Rebekah, the same mother who built the lie in the first place, has to become the one who unravels its consequences. She goes to Jacob with the urgency of someone who has heard a clock start ticking. Flee, she tells him. Go to my brother Laban in Haran, hundreds of miles east. A journey no woman of that era could easily undertake herself. No phone call. No way to check on him once he's gone. Stay there, she says, until your brother's fury cools down. Genesis never records Rebekah seeing her favorite son again. She frames the send-off to Isaac as something else entirely. A search for a proper wife, someone from their own people rather than the local Canaanite women Isaac and Rebekah both despised. It's true, and it's also a cover story, and both of those things can be true at once. Isaac, still not knowing the full weight of what has happened in his own household, calls Jacob in one more time, and instead of cursing him, instead of the punishment you might expect for a son who lied twice to his father's face, Isaac blesses him again, deliberately, this time, eyes open, so to speak, even though his physical eyes never will be again. He speaks over Jacob the covenant blessing of Abraham himself, the promise of land, of descendants, of a nation that would come from this one deceiving, running, terrified man. Here's the part that should stop you cold. God does not wait for Jacob to become someone worthy of that blessing before letting it stand. The blessing goes out over a liar's head while the lie is still warm. If you've ever wondered whether you have to clean yourself up before God, we'll use you. Hold on to this scene. Isaac does not know the full truth when he blesses Jacob a second time. But God does. God knows exactly what Jacob did in that tent, and the promise stands anyway. Not because the deception didn't matter. It mattered enormously. It would cost Jacob decades of consequences still ahead of him. But the covenant was never resting on Jacob's character to begin with. It never had been. And so Jacob leaves, alone, on foot as far as we can tell, with whatever he could carry, walking away from a father he deceived, a brother who wants him dead, and a mother he will very likely never see again in this life. He is guilty, and he is grieving, and he is completely, totally exposed. And this is precisely the man the ground opens up for. So that's where we are. A deceiver, a death threat, a 500-mile walk with no company and no plan except to survive. And somewhere on that road, the sun goes down on a man who has never in his life been this alone. If you're finding this channel for the first time, this is exactly what we do here. We take the parts of the Bible everyone thinks they already know, and we go back to the original language, the original world, the actual dirt under people's fingernails, to show you what was really happening. Subscribe if that's the kind of thing you want more of. And if you've got a moment, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every one. Now, back to the man on the ground. Because what happens next is going to completely change how you picture this story. Jacob reaches a certain place. That's the actual phrase the text uses. A certain place, almost deliberately vague, as if to say this could have been anywhere. This could have been nowhere in particular. He picks up a stone, not a pillow, not a blanket, not anything soft. A stone for his head. And he lies down and sleeps. And he dreams. Here's what almost every translation of this dream gets slightly wrong, and it's not a small mistake. It's the kind of mistake that has shaped stained glass windows and children's Bible illustrations for centuries. Most English translations say Jacob saw a ladder set up on the earth, its top reaching to heaven, with angels going up and down on it. You've probably pictured this exact scene, a wooden ladder, rope rungs maybe, angels climbing it like it's a fire escape between two buildings. Here's what most people miss entirely. The Hebrew word behind ladder is sullam, and sullam appears exactly once, one single time, in the entire Hebrew Bible. Nowhere else. Not in any other story, any other prophet, any other book. Scholars call a word like this a hapax legomenon, a word that shows up once and never again, which means we don't get the luxury of comparing it against other uses to nail down exactly what it meant. We have to work it out from its root. And the root is where this gets genuinely strange. The verb behind sullam is salal, and salal doesn't mean climb or rest against a wall. Salal means to heap up, to cast up, to build by piling. It's the same word used elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible for building a siege ramp against a city wall or paving a raised highway. Ancient Near Eastern scholars, and even modern study Bible footnotes, if you check the NI5 or the ESV, will tell you this. Believe Jacob wasn't seeing a portable ladder a man carries under one arm. He was seeing something built, fixed, solid, a staircase, or a ramp made of heaped up stone. And that detail should send a shiver through you, because there's a structure in the ancient world that matches that description exactly. The ziggurat. If you've ever seen a picture of one, a stepped Mesopotamian temple tower, rising in terraces with an outer staircase climbing to a shrine at the very top, you've seen what scholars believe Jacob's dream was echoing. The ziggurat of Ur, still standing in ruins in modern Iraq, comes from roughly this same era of history. The same general world Abraham's family had migrated out of a few generations earlier. The whole theological purpose of a ziggurat was to give a god a staircase down to earth, a meeting point built by human hands, straining upward, hoping something divine would notice the effort and climb down to meet you halfway. Here's the detail that should stop you cold. The last time Genesis used almost this exact image, a structure with its top reaching to heaven, was chapters earlier at Babel. Let us build ourselves a tower, with its top in the heavens. That tower was humanity's attempt to reach up and make a name for itself. It ended in scattered languages and a broken project. Now, here is Jacob, the deceiver, the fugitive, the man who has nothing built around him at all. And God shows him a staircase that no human hand constructed. Jacob didn't build this one. He didn't even know it was there. He was simply asleep on the ground when it appeared over him. And on it, the angels of God are going up and coming down. In that order, up first, then down, which tells you something quietly important. These messengers already belonged to that place before Jacob ever arrived. They weren't climbing up to reach heaven for the first time. They were already stationed there, moving between two worlds that, as far as Jacob knew a few hours earlier, had absolutely nothing to do with each other. Stay with me, because the staircase is not even the most important part of the dream. Standing above it, not climbing it, not needing it, simply standing there, is the Lord himself, and he speaks. He identifies himself as the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac. He repeats, word for word in substance, the covenant blessing Jacob's father spoke over him days earlier in that tent. And then he adds something Isaac never could have promised, something only God himself has the authority to guarantee. I am with you. I will keep you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Read that again the way Jacob would have heard it, half asleep with a rock digging into his skull. A wanted man 500 miles from anyone who loved him. I will not leave you. Think about what those 5 words would mean to you if you heard them on the worst night of your life. Not, I will forgive you eventually once you've made things right. Not, I will bless you once you've earned it. Just, I will not leave you. Spoken over a man who, 12 hours earlier, was still wiping the smell of his brother's clothing off his own skin. Jacob wakes up, and the first words out of his mouth are not relief. They're not even joy, not exactly. They're fear, a very specific, very ancient kind of fear. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Then, almost in the same breath, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, what a beautiful dream. He doesn't say, what a strange thing to see on the road. He treats the ground beneath him as though it has become something else entirely, as though the ordinary dirt he collapsed onto the night before, exhausted and alone, has been quietly, invisibly holy the entire time, and he simply didn't know it. So Jacob does something. He takes the stone, the same stone he used as a pillow, the same hard, uncomfortable object that marked just how little he had when he lay down, and he sets it up as a pillar. He pours oil over it, and he renames the place. It used to be called Luz. From this point on, he calls it Beth El, House of God. Here's what most people never connect. Remember the staircase built by no human hands, standing over a man who had absolutely nothing built around him? That image doesn't end in Genesis. It keeps traveling forward, all the way into the New Testament, where a rabbi from Nazareth is talking to a skeptical man named Nathanael, a man who, just moments earlier, doubted that anything good could come out of Jesus' hometown. And Jesus tells him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Ascending and descending. The exact phrase from Bethel. The exact staircase Jacob saw over his head on that stone, centuries earlier, on a road he never chose to be on. This is not a story about a coincidence in the wording. This is not a story about a clever literary echo scholars enjoy pointing out. This is not a story about an obscure detail buried in a footnote. This is a story about Jesus looking a doubting man in the eye and quietly claiming to be the staircase Jacob saw, the meeting point between heaven and earth. except this time it isn't stone. It's a person. It's flesh and blood, standing where the ziggurats of the ancient world always fail to actually reach. Because here's the difference: nobody built into their own ziggurats. No matter how high they piled the bricks, every staircase humanity ever constructed to reach God was built from the ground up. Human effort, straining, climbing, hoping something divine would eventually notice and come down. Jacob's staircase was the opposite. God provided it. God stood at the top of it before Jacob ever knew it existed. And in Jesus, that same pattern reaches its full weight. God doesn't wait for you to build your way up to Him. He comes down. He has always been the one coming down. Think about what that means if you've ever felt like Jacob did on that road. Cut off, hundreds of miles from anyone who could help you. Guilty of things you can't undo. Lying down at night with nothing but a hard, uncomfortable reminder of how alone you actually are. Think of a parent lying awake past midnight, staring at a phone that hasn't rung, waiting to hear that a child made it home safely, aching with a distance they cannot close from where they're lying. That ache, the not knowing, the waiting, the desperate hope that someone is coming toward you across the gap, is the oldest human ache there is. And Bethel is God's answer to it, spoken over a man who had done absolutely nothing to earn it. Jacob didn't build the staircase. He didn't climb it. He didn't even see the bottom rung, if there ever was one. He just woke up in the one place he thought was the emptiest, most abandoned patch of ground in the world, and found out it had never been empty at all. If you've ever assumed you had to fix yourself before God would come near you, this is the moment in Scripture that quietly says otherwise. You don't have to finish running first. You don't have to arrive somewhere respectable, somewhere safe, somewhere you've earned. You can be exactly where Jacob was, guilty, exhausted, alone on the hardest ground you've ever slept on. And the staircase can already be standing over you before you've done a single thing to deserve it. So here's what you're really taking away from this. First, the fact itself. The word in Genesis is not ladder. It's sullam, a word used exactly once in the whole Hebrew Bible, rooted in a verb that means to build up, to heap, to pave, pointing far more likely toward a staircase or a ramp, the same kind of architecture the ancient world used for their ziggurats. That's not a small translation footnote. It changes the entire picture in your head. Second, and this is the one that actually matters for your life, Jacob received that vision at the exact moment he had built nothing, earned nothing, and deserved, by any fair reading of the last 3 chapters, absolutely none of it. God didn't wait for Jacob to clean himself up first. He met him on bare ground, with a rock for a pillow, still covered in the dust of his own deception. And third, the one I want you sitting with tonight, that staircase never stopped being offered. It didn't end with Jacob. It didn't end at Bethel. Centuries later, Jesus stood in front of a skeptical man and said, in effect, that staircase you've heard about since you were a child, I am it. The gap between where you are and where God is was never yours to close by climbing. It was always His to close by coming down. And He already has. What part of Jacob's staircase moved you the most tonight? The word study, the ziggurat, or the connection to Jesus? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. You are not lying on empty ground. You never were.